Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I thought I would chat with you guys a little bit about a question I got from a viewer who wanted to know, hey, how heavy is too heavy on deadlifts? I don't know how heavy I should go. And here's what I would say. Look, follow a program. You need to follow a set program. That will determine it. And let's assume you do want to pull really heavy, right? I took some time off from pulling really heavy and have done just a lot of base building again and really focused on max squatting and all of that. And I've just now recently started working heavy pulls back in, and I'm having to build my deadlift back up. But I do a wide variety of deadlifts. Now, the reason I'm showing these clips of these are ones that I've ramped to a miss. And I want people to notice here, I'm not afraid to grab a weight that I'm not going to be able to pull, because that's how we find our limits on a deadlift. And so the question I would ask is, what exactly are you doing with the deadlift? Are you doing heavy deadlifts to test your strength, or to teach yourself how to grind through and pull through with a really heavy weight and find your weak links? Because that's what I do. And if that's the case and your programming is on point and you have them spaced out correctly, there is no weight that you should be afraid to attempt, right? There is no too heavy. Either you make the lift or you don't. Now, I miss through the first few of these. I do a ramp up and you guys see me hit a miss. Something breaks down, my grip gives, in which case you need to do grip work. I had a problem with my hook grip on one of these. Missed lifts from that, or a muscle gave out, and it lets me identify my weak links and re-getting my deadlift back up. Because, I need to get my deadlift back to 600 plus. That's just what needs to happen for me. So, you can't be afraid to do that. But in my case, in my programming, I pull heavy once every 2 weeks. Right? I only have a max effort deadlift day every 2 weeks. And in between is very large amounts of submaximal speed pulls. Right? I do 20 speed pulls every single week. So I'm going to do 40 sets of speed pulls with weights that are, again, very, very light in between. But here's the thing. When you run a system like this, like I'm doing, and I'm giving this as an example, I'm only pulling heavy once every 2 weeks, and then I have a day off from real training the next day. If you're doing something like that, and that's going to be your heavy deadlift, because that's mine, you don't need to be afraid. You don't need to be afraid of missing a lift. Ramp up to a heavy deadlift and see where you're at. Now, obviously, I rotate through them. I don't repeat the same variation, because I'm not doing this to necessarily just build my deadlift. I'm doing it as a strength tester on these different variations to figure out where my weaknesses are. Because if you have a weakness on any deadlift variation, I don't care if it's a sumo, deficit sumo, sumo with chains, sumo with bands, conventional with any of those, trap bar, they're all deadlifts. You're going to find your weak links in your body. Like the deadlift in any deadlift variation is a beautiful tool for finding the weaknesses in your body. But I'm not using it necessarily to train my strength outside of learning to strain. And if you're going to do it and learn to strain, you can avoid overuse issues and injuries by just rotating through variations, can't you? Because I'm doing it as a test of strength to see where my weak points are, and to get used to pulling against a really heavy weight. And heavy is relative. Heavy for me might be light for you. Right? I've got subscribers who can out deadlift me by 200 plus pounds. There are subscribers who can. So my bailed lift might be something you could do for 6 or 7 reps, But by that same token, a lot of people might see this, and what I'm even hitting for ramp ups might be exceed your lifetime best you're ever going to get. That's just reality. So heavy is a very relative term. But if your programming is on point, when you go to pull a heavy deadlift, you don't need to say how much weight is appropriate. Pull and find out. And as far as missing lifts go, if you know how to deadlift correctly, and you have built your support musculature, you have strong abs, you have a strong back, you know how to pull without rounding your lower back, you know how to pull without arm bend, right? And in my case, I use hook grip. You know how to pull without arm bend. It's perfectly safe to attempt a deadlift and miss it, right? You try to pull a weight that you're not capable of pulling and to miss a lift. It's safe. The deadlift is one of the safest lifts in regard to that. You want to know what gets people hurt on deadlifts? Using really, really terrible form sometimes to attempt a weight they can't get, right? Excessive lower back rounding. Pulling with arm bend because you jerk the weight up with a weight you're not capable of handling and you tear a bicep. Or bouncing the weight off the floor doing touch and go, right? Those are how you get hurt. How about straps? Ooh, that's a big one. Sorry, strong men. How about doing a bunch of heavy pulling with straps? Because a lot of times what happens, if you have to grind a deadlift too hard and it starts jarring up and down because you're again bouncing it, your grip gives out, right? A lot of times the grip gives out when the weight starts to have some up and down, right? Like what you saw me start to miss there. Sometimes that will cause your grip to go ahead and slip because we don't have a smooth, fast pull anymore. We have some jarring and bouncing happening. And when that happens, sometimes the weight will bounce out of our hands. Well, with straps, it's not going to bounce out of your hands. All right, so really, really heavy attempts that you miss if you don't know what you're doing with straps, that might lead to a tear or a pull. Right, that might be the case. You guys can watch me do some speed work in the background. So I thought I would also throw some of this in while we're talking, because I talked about, for me, this is what I do in between the heavy days, right? I do 20 singles of speed pulls every week, and then we do supplemental work. But by doing the heavy pulls, that can be very, very valuable to you. And in other words, if you start missing deadlifts, you start missing pulls, and it doesn't matter which variation, you can start identifying which muscles are limiting you. Because the deadlift itself, and by the deadlift, I don't mean just conventional deadlift, I mean heavy pulls off the floor. Let's clarify that. Doing heavy 1 rep max pulls from the floor will find the weaknesses in your body. The deadlift is a legitimate and true test of strength. And all deadlifts are. They'll find the weak links. Whatever is weakest in your body is, other than a few muscles that don't contribute significantly, out of probably 70% of the muscles in your body, out of those 70%, the weakest links are going to limit your deadlift. So actually attempting deadlifts that are either really difficult for you or in which you miss can help you identify those weaknesses. It will let you figure out what you need to work on. In some cases, again, you can visualize it. We can even look at our technique, though, sometimes and say, hey, I've got certain muscles I need to use more in the deadlift. In my case, I need more glute and hamstring. I need to use them more effectively in my pulls, and I need to continue to strengthen them. More training on focusing on learning to use them as one unit also. But we can also go by feel. When you attempt various heavy pulls, you know what muscles, a lot of times you can feel what muscles are giving out. You know what's straining hardest. And if that muscle's straining hardest, then you probably need to work on it. And by work on it, I mean even hypertrophy work. Come in and make it bigger. If your hamstrings are giving out on a deadlift when you attempt that heavy weight, what does that tell you? You need to do more hamstring work. That's what it tells you. Now, people will say, but doesn't missed deadlifts impact recovery? Yes, absolutely. So back over to the other point. You need to be on a proper program where it's structured correctly. Using mine as an example, I don't do any heavy pulls outside of my heavy deadlift day. There's no heavy pull. There's nothing above, even with bands and everything else, nothing is really above 70%. Okay? You don't really go above 70%. Every 2 weeks, a heavy pull. Push it as hard as I can. And then I don't do it again for at least 14 days. right? That would work. That's exactly what I mean by your programming. And we use other tools in between to build the heavy deadlifts. Box squats, good mornings, hamstring work, thoracic erector work, grip work, right? All these things. Use these tools. But my other point is, if your form is decent and you're not doing silly, stupid things, there is no upper limit. You don't need to be afraid of a heavy deadlift. It's one of the easiest exercises you can possibly just let go of. It's one of the safest exercises to actually miss, right? The bar isn't going to land on you. You're not going to get pinned under the bar. It's not dangerous to miss it unless you miss it and do something really stupid. So just strap yourself to the bar. Okay, that people get hurt. All right, guys, so that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.